John, I appreciate you making this happen, man.
No worries. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we only chatted for about 30 seconds before we started recording, so this is all unscripted right here. But to give you some backstory, I've got a online fitness community and largely people doing CrossFit. And this show, the Very Not Random podcast, it's a lot of CrossFit enthusiasts, but people from we've interviewed strongmen, Olympic lifters, gymnasts, and all that stuff. And I asked them like, hey, who should I get on the show that is like not just a CrossFit? Like I want to talk to somebody outside of our normal deal. And you were one of the names that came up, and I did a little research. I'm like, this guy's got a cool story. So that's kind of the genesis of why we're talking today.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I appreciate Phil for putting my name forward and yeah, setting us up.
Yeah, well, to give people, you were kind enough to give me some of your backstory, other than the investigations that I did online. And you've got Britain's natural strongman 2 times, Midlands Strongest Man twice. You've competed in England's Strongest Man 3 times. You previously broke a world record on 24 hours in the ski erg, which sounds awful. You've done tons of marathons. You play rugby, so you've done everything from super heavy lifts for 1 rep to incredibly long endurance and everything in between. And that's kind of what I want to chat with you about. And one of the things that you said, well, first of all, maybe we should start with, you said that you broke your neck playing rugby.
Yeah. I don't recommend doing that.
How long ago was
Yeah.
that?
I was mid-20s and yeah, a scrum collapsed and just felt a clunk in my neck. Stupidly played on for 10 or 15 minutes and then ended up going to
Sure.
hospital. Um, you don't know what you don't know, do you? And you're like, well, my hand still works, so I'm sure it's fine. And
Oh,
yeah, I went to hospital and then found out that I had a hairline fracture, which then led to me taking a year out of rugby. And that's what then led me down the strongman pathway. And yeah, the rest is kind of history from there.
so it took a broken neck.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's one of those things like people's pathways into different things, and it's the same as like the endurance story with that took COVID and lockdowns and everything else, and they're things that you would never have looked at if you were in your normal lane, your normal bubble, and just doing what you've always done. So I've always identified as a rugby player. I've played rugby since before I can remember. That's what I do. I train in the gym to be better at rugby. I play rugby every Saturday, and that was that. And then when that gets taken away from you, your identity gets kind of ripped away with an injury that's going to keep you sidelined for a long time. And yeah, it starts the peripheral vision starts to get wider, and you start to look at other things, and maybe there's more to life than the rugby.
Right.
And
Well,
then that, and yeah, that's what led into strongman, and then that's what ended up happening with strongman. I ended up getting a career-ending injury with that, and then again through the rehab process of that, it was like, well, what could I do next? And the journey continues of finding more and more stupid things to try and see what my body can do.
I was gonna say we got to find a better way for you to transition from one sport than to another than a catastrophic injury. What let people know where are you located in the world?
So I'm over in England, so a place called Worcester, which I know traditionally is quite difficult for you guys over the pond to pronounce. Where Worcestershire sauce comes from. So yeah,
Yes.
so I'm in England. So I'm originally from Yorkshire, and then I came down to Worcester for university, and then never left. So I've been here for 20 years now.
As an American, it's just one of the countries where, for some reason, rugby hasn't really taken off over here, and I don't know why that is. But anytime that it crosses my path or I see it or whatnot, man, it looks ferociously brutal. It looks like just absolute warfare and chaos out there with just huge, strong, explosive individuals with like no padding in any way, shape, or form. Which I would think that my country would eat that up with, like they would love it. I don't know why it hasn't caught on, but it looks crazy to me. And can I assume that it's a good time and that's why you do it, or you just like to battle with other huge people?
Yeah, I think it's very similar to the NFL and kind of hockey and any kind of contact sport. Really, it's that shared struggle, isn't it? Nothing brings people together than things like shared difficulty and shared enemy, ultimately, isn't
Mm-hmm.
it? The opposition and the other team that you want to intimidate and physically manipulate to bend within the game that you want to play and how you want to play it. And there's not that's why I keep going back to rugby, it's because it's not the game that you miss, it's the changing rooms, it's the lads, it's the shared struggle, it's the other
That
30 lads that are
brotherhood.
there on a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock in the rain and the snow and the wind when you could be at home with your family. But that's what makes those victories on the Saturday all that sweeter, because they're earned. You can't get given a rugby victory. You've got to earn it. And yeah, cost of entry is that struggle and is that challenge. And I think that's why it's so deeply loved around the world. Really, is because there's not really many places you can hide on a rugby field, and you find out a lot about yourself and a lot about your teammates and who you are as a person through the sport.
You know, obviously we just met, and so I don't know if you naturally are a humble person or you like to talk about yourself, but if you're humble, I'm going to ask you not to be humble for a second, because there's something about your story that's so fascinating and amazing and also like confusing. I mean, were you just one of the strongest human beings on the face of the earth previously? Because it seems really like a short period of time, and that most people couldn't do this. Where, okay, you got your injury in rugby, and then you just said, I'm going to attempt strongman. Like, hey, I broke my neck, I'm going to attempt some strongman stuff. And then within 2 years, you're Britain's natural strongest man, and you're competing in England's strongest man, non-tested. Like, that's a really short period of time to say, I'm going to dabble in something else, and then you're the man. Like, how did that happen in the span of 2 years? That's crazy.
I think the strongman stuff specifically is fortune. It's good luck. Now, I always use this example of, you could love sprinting, you could want to be a 100-meter sprinter, but your genetics, whether we like it or not,
Sure.
I could try. I could devote my entire life, and I'm never going to run a sub 10-second 100 meters. Genetically, that's just not on the cards.
Mm-hmm.
Strength is the same. Now, you don't have to have the best genetics to get stronger, but you have to have incredibly good genetics and a predisposition to be strong.
Mm.
And then mixed in with the hard work and the intensity and the education and doing the right things and eating well and recovering well and all the sports science stuff that comes into it, and the whole talent's only useful if you work hard and all of the usual kind of mantras. But I think genetically, I'm just gifted to be strong.
That's
My
incredible.
first ever deadlift was a 200 kilogram plus deadlift. Sorry, I better work that out in pounds, as I know.
Yeah, 440, 200.
Yeah, 440 kilo deadlift was like my first ever deadlift. Which and then it took me 9 or 10 months to then deadlift 300.
Wow.
And then at the time, like 300 kilos back then was a rare thing. There weren't that many guys pulling 300, and now it's kind of quite a common number. It's still an impressive number, but there's so many
Sure.
more guys that can now pull 300. And it was the same back then. Like, people, oh, you'll never pull 400 drug free, and all the usual stuff and the stigmas that come around being a natural athlete. And for me, the whole drug free thing was never. I didn't. I have an issue with drugs. Like, at the end of the day, with strongman, it's in the non-tested variety of strongman. It's used, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
really. It's not a secret anymore. But
No, I don't think it's a
um,
mystery.
but for me, it was always a case of, that's your ace card, and use it when you need it. Use it when you've got nothing left in the tank genetically and through hard work and through training well and so on and so forth. And so for me, it was like, oh, I can't pull 400 drug free. Right, let's go. Let's see where we can take this. And in the space of, I think it was another 18 months from there, then 320 fell, then 340, then 350, then 800 pounds, and then the big 400 went.
Which
Um,
is crazy.
and and yeah, looking back, I genuinely don't even recognize myself in those videos because it feels like a different lifetime ago. But I think it is that perfect mixture of the right time in my life to be able to commit that much to the training, the eating, and the lifestyle. Because to get that strong, it's not a hobby, it's not a passion. You can be a hobbyist CrossFit, you can be a hobbyist rugby player, you can just have a run around on a Saturday. That's fine.
Sure. Yep.
To be brutally strong or to be incredibly good at CrossFit or any sport, it's a lifestyle. It's you have to devote nearly every waking minute and thought and recovery and nutrition plan and all that to it. And it was a unique time in my life where I was able to commit fully to it, along with being evidently blessed with good genetics, and then putting my heart and soul into getting to that. And I do genuine, and that's not to. I know you said don't be humble. That's not to diminish the work that went into it and the feat
Absolutely.
that it was to pull it, but I do think one of the things as I've got older is looking at some of the things that come out in the fitness industry, and I do think there's a line between we can achieve anything we want with hard work and dedication, but there also has to be that line in the sand of an asterisk almost if you're also genetically gifted in this field.
100%. 100%.
And for me, genetics is a little bit like the whole druggie. When you see guys that have got these massive transformation pictures with clearly chemically enhanced, and then it's sold as a drug-free transformation, it's very similar to that. I can sit here and be like, I'm an online coach. I can get you to 400 kilo deadlift and yada yada yada. But genetics plays such a massive role in that. And yeah, so for me, in terms of the strongman stuff, that was the key thing for me that I think accelerated my
Mm.
growth with it. And then it was just threw myself into it. I did sport and exercise science at university. So I got the scientific background that sits behind it. I met some of the strongest guys in the world, so guys like Lauren Charlet and Terry Hollands, who at the time were the absolute pinnacle of the sport as well, and got to train with those guys and learn from those guys and spent time with those people. And you just absorb it and you just continue to grow, continue
Yes.
to develop, continue to put the time in, and it just becomes your identity, becomes your life,
Yeah.
becomes who you are. And yeah, so it was a very interesting jaunt into, oh, maybe I'll do a strongman competition. And
Well,
then
I'd love to pause on that for a second. It's funny. I interviewed Lawrence Chalet for the show here as well.
hmm,
He's such a good dude, and just a legend in strongman world. But so when you got to you worked up, okay, so first deadlift is 200 kilos, 440 pounds, and then eventually making your way to 400 kilos, which is 880 pounds, over the span of, let's say, a few years, more or less.
yeah, it's about 4 years, I think.
Okay, that's crazy. So you had what started with a really heavy deadlift, and then you doubled an already heavy deadlift over the course of 4 years. And agree with what you say, like depending upon where you're coming from, what you got genetically, like most people won't get there, but most people will improve and reach whatever their potential happens to be. So people, they love the deadlift, they love the back squat, they love lifting, they love heavy weights. And so I would love to just, take your time if you don't mind, because anytime I get somebody who's outside of the normal range of athletes that I talk to, like I like to learn how other people have achieved their goals. What could you walk me through, like when you were all in, not living a balanced life, fully committed to like making this happen? What did a week of training look like? How many workout days, how many off days, and then how long did one of those days take you in the gym? And then could you actually walk through one of those days? So how many days a week? How long did one day take? And could you walk us through a session, for example?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of like what you're saying in the first point of that is, it's not to say that you can't get stronger and you can't lift incredibly heavy weights. I just think
Sure.
my story in terms of a 4 year jump from 2 to 400 kilos is quite unique in its own little way.
100%. 100%.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of like getting stronger in general and how I train back then is how I train now. It's how I train a lot of my guys, whether it's strongman, whether it's rugby, whether it's just triathlon or Ironman or whatever. It's essentially it's firstly it's having a plan. Now,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds the most basic advice in the world, but it's still the most misunderstood part of training. Having a progressive plan. Like that's step one. Before you even worry about nutrition and everything else, it's actually understanding where you are now, where you want to get to, increments that you need to hit, and certain markers you need to hit, and what time frames you need to hit them by. But in terms of what my life looked like back then, it was at the time I just opened my gym. So I was up at 5 a.m. every day, coaching 6 till 11 a.m. Then I'd quite literally gorge on food, all of your usual high protein, high calorie. And back then it was, I mean, those were the days of like paleo and where it was like nutrition science was still very bro sciencey.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it was like, oh, just any calories are good calories, and it was kind of like 5, 6, 7,000 calories a day, and it was just eat as much as you can, and then by virtue of eating as much as you can, you're going to be hitting a decent protein intake. Which again, if I was reliving my life now, I wouldn't have that approach. It
Sure.
would be more like 3.5 to 4,000 calories and 300 grams of protein a day, rather than the insane amount of food that I used to eat. Afternoon was spent normally training. Most sessions were 2 hours long. And again, it was 3 to 4 sessions a week. So in my off season, it would be a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example. And then as you get into competition season, then Saturday comes in. And again, like without sounding like an old man, but back in the day, strongman equipment wasn't routinely found in gyms. I had to travel an hour and a half to train with Loz to
Mm.
even to see a log, to get near Atlas stones, to use farmers walks. Like I sound like a grandpa sometimes when I'm telling kids, like, you
It's
don't know how
true
lucky
though.
you are. You've got farmers walks, you've got yokes, you've got logs, you've got Atlas stones. I'm like, I had to travel a 4 hour round trip to use that stuff when I was your age. But yeah, so Saturdays used to be my event day. Whereas again, if I was doing it now, if I had access to all the implements all the time, I would probably have interspersed those out throughout the week rather than just one heavy event day every week, which ended up causing more damage than good sometimes because you're essentially competing every weekend just in training.
Mm.
But yeah, like a normal training session, back then it was warm up on a barbell and just start adding weight. But the challenge that you had ultimately is the stronger you are, the longer it takes to get to working weight. Like 40 kilos, 80 kilos, 120 kilos, 160 kilos, 200 kilos. Like you've got to do 7 or 8 rounds of warm ups just to get near your working rounds, working weight. And that's why the sessions used to take so long. It was kind of like 90 minutes to 2 hours, and 45 minutes of that was just taking over your main compound movement. And ultimately, for me, strength is a skill. So to be really physically competent in those movements is what, for most people, sees the most progression to begin with. So deadlifting, squatting, pressing were kind of like your main component movements, and that was what took over most of the session. And then your accessory work was your very typical kind of bodybuilding style, because mass moves mass, and you want to also look like you lift as well, rather than just looking like you eat. So again, like a typical session, so normal week would be Monday would be I'd normally start the week with squats and then
Okay.
have my accessory work built around that, which would normally be more like upper base, so back and arms, for example. Wednesday would be my pressing day, and then that would be your accessory work would be triceps and some single limb stuff, because the single limb carries over really heavily to your carrying and your movement events. And then Friday would be my heavy deadlifts, supersetted with whatever was lacking from earlier on in the week. And then,
Okay.
like I say, in competition season, it would then be events. And then as my training started to plateau and started to slow down, and the beginning days were very much like your 5-3-1, 5-3-1, 5-3-1. Just repeat it, rinse and repeat until it stops working. And then it became far more advanced in looking at speed work and banded work and tempo work and slow eccentrics and deadlifting from heights and box squats and all the other kind of more advanced stuff. And that's again a mistake I see a lot of guys make it nowadays, is that sometimes I've sent programs to people in the past and they're like, oh, the compound stuff's just 5-5-3-1. Right. Yeah, because your training age is 18 months. So right now, 5-3-1 works.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's understanding where you are in your journey and your maturity with weightlifting as to what programming, what rep ranges, what total volume you can use and things like that. But back then for the first year, 5-3-1 was every cycle was adding weight, adding weight, adding weight. And then, like I say, what took me to 300 to 400 was then the speed work, the dynamic work, understanding that recovery is just as important as the effort and the intensity. And
Yes.
again, that was one of the big things that I saw training with other guys that were using chemical enhancement. Is
Mm-hmm.
I could deadlift, let's just say 350 for 5, and I'm feeling it 7-8 days later.
Right.
My training partners could do that, and the next day they're back heavy lifting again because their
Right.
recovery is just so much faster.
Right.
And again, so from the drug-free side, it was all around actually quality over quantity, but quality done with intensity and making sure there was adequate time to recover. And again, I think that's one of the things I often see done incorrectly, is because people are so desperate to see improvements. They just do as much as they can. and then that leads to not doing much with high quality or high intensity, and therefore
100%.
you're not then actually pushing the needle forward. It's just kind of, you're a busy fool. You're just doing a lot but not getting anywhere.
Oh, this, from all the different people, that's why I love talking to so many different people from different disciplines, because while everyone, something I've learned as well is, like, back when I was younger, I used to think there was one way to get to the finish line, right? The more people I talked to, I realized there's so many different ways to get to the finish line that work, and they can be different. And then even in those different approaches or different methodologies or different life experiences that were successful, they were all successful, there are like common threads. And one of those common threads is ensuring that you're getting enough rest so you can attack your sessions with intensity. That sometimes there's a point of diminishing returns where adding a bit more doesn't actually give you back what you thought it was. You actually plateau or regress and all that. And you're touching on that as well, which is fascinating. So I'm curious, when you were in the, I think you said it's the off season, where you had 3 training days and you didn't have that competition day on the weekend. And so you had 3 training days a week. And one of them was, like, for example, squat, the other was press, the other was dead. Is that to imply that during that, however many months that was, that your one squat day, like, so you would just go below parallel one time a week and you would just press one time a week? And even given that, what most people, I'm going to assume, listening or to watching this, would think that if I only go below parallel one time a week, that's not going to be enough to drive the needle forward. But you're actually saying quite the opposite, unless I'm misunderstanding you.
Yeah, exactly that. So again, so like for example, my training at the minute, I'll squat heavy on a Monday because I can't squat too heavy through a Saturday, because otherwise I'm broken come rugby game. So for example, right now, every Monday, 5 sets of 5, 70 to 75%, depending how bad my back feels after rugby.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the only squat movement I do. I do split squats, Bulgarian squats, and split squats and various things, but the actual compound movement of a back squat is just once a week, 5 by 5, done with intensity, but done with the intensity that I can provide on the day based on the version of me that's walked into the gym on that day.
Absolutely. Yes.
Some days that's 180 kilos. This week it was 220 kilos. It was like butter. Everything was moving well. And I'm like, I'm back. I'm
Great
back
day
in
in
the
the
gym.
gym.
But then guaranteed next Monday I'll turn up and I'll feel like I'm made of dust and I need to get the oil out on the old creaking knees and everything else. But the point remains is that week on week, month on month, that number is still increasing because it's done at an intensity and it's done at a level that it creates that stimulus. And I think that's the full body movement has been great to see. More instead of people just doing a leg day, a back day, an arm day, whatever. And it's
Right.
gone moved away from this kind of like really like bro bodybuilding style into we train everything all the time. But one of the things that I see with that, and I'm a big fan of that, and I train quite similarly to that with a lot of my guys. But the issue that you have with it is like, oh, I won't squat too heavy because I've got another variation of I've got front squats on Wednesday. And then it's my speed work on the Monday on deadlift, for example. I won't go too heavy on my speed work because I've got a deadlift heavy again on Friday. And then I won't go too heavy on my deadlifts on Friday because I've got speed again on Monday. And
Right.
it's this, they almost then end up conflicting and cannibalizing each other because you're almost constantly saving yourself for the next variation of that lift rather than going, actually, let's work that movement to an intensity that's going to be 9 out of 10 RPE or even 10 out of 10 RPE and quality over quantity. And when I was 24 versus now when I'm 38, the outcome is still the same because you're applying intensity to a load, to a movement, working on technical competency,
Yes, sir.
eating adequate protein, recovering, yada, yada, yada. From that, the improvements are still coming. And I do think that that is, again, you don't want to sound like grandpa in the corner, do you? But it is a little bit like the more that science and social media and the internet has grown, the more overly complicated training has become. And by virtue, then the focus is on what's the best plan rather than what's the best intensity and what's the best effort. And that's one of the things I always look at with the guys that I coach is I always ask them to send me their top sets and their heavy sets because it's actually, are you actually working hard enough? Because
Mm-hmm.
everyone wants to do more. But how about we work harder with what we're doing rather than trying to add more days in or add more volume or add more things? And sometimes it's not more things that you need, it's just more intensity in the thing that you're doing already.
Yes, sir.
And that's
Yep.
always my challenge to a lot of people when people can like deep dive into my philosophies around training is train with an intensity you can recover from, but not to the point where you're overcomplicating the process. Strength is a very simple philosophy when you actually strip all the BS and intensity and intent. And if we just got back to that, I think lot more people would find a lot more enjoyment, a lot more progress with their training instead of, oh, do I use the conjugate method or do I use this method or the bodybuilding or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, and again, it's like all these apps now of measuring your bar speed and how fast are your speed pulls and things like that. It's like, can we not just actually look at it in the mirror and go, yeah, that was fast? Or no, that was slow. We need to go faster.
I agree.
But
There's a lot of wonderful things that social media has brought, but in the world of strength and conditioning, it's also brought just a lot of distraction and a lot of people wanting to chase the shiny object instead of just doing the basics that are time tested and pouring their heart and soul into them and watching things go in a good direction. I'm curious because this is a question I like to ask people and I get a range of answers. On that day that you're doing, for example, your 5x5 back squat and you're taking it as serious as you can, how long do you rest between sets?
90-ish seconds.
Oh, that's quick. Okay.
Um, yeah, and again, it's that balance between I could probably less rest for 3 minutes, and I could maybe put a little bit more weight on the bar. But if I maintain that consistent rep period, to me, right, in 12 weeks' time, I want you to hit well 1 rep max squat. What's the absolute max you can lift? Then it would probably be a minute rest period. And it would probably be trying to put as much weight as I can every single round. But that's also not within the demands of my sport. My sport, I don't get to do one squat and then sit around on the sideline for 3 minutes. I've got to then get up, run
Mm.
around, and then do the next thing. So yeah, for me, I go 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes, unless my phone starts distracting me. But
Fair
yeah,
enough.
it's essentially that's the main. I think the key thing for me is consistency of the variables. So if
Sure.
I'm gonna hit, it's pointless me hitting 90-second rest period this week and then a 5 minute rest period next week because yeah, you're gonna lift more weight. But then when you then go back the following week to then you might not have as much time or you might be feeling a bit more energetic. So you cut down your rest period, then everything feels heavy again because you're not resting as much. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's just keep the variables consistent and then from there you can actually gauge better progress. And that's again goes back to my first point of just having a plan and understanding what you're trying to achieve with that plan. Um, and again, I just think a lot of people place a lot of effort and emphasis on those top end numbers now. And it's again, you see a lot of people, oh, what percentage should I lift at, and what numbers should I be lifting, and what if I'm going to hit this lift then, and do I need to hit this lift by now? And there's so many more variables in life that affect what walks into the gym on that day. And this is probably to the people listening that are over 30s that maybe have kids and busy jobs and everything else. Like when you're young, dumb, 21, and then the biggest responsibility you've got is being able to afford to go for some beers on a Saturday night with the boys. You can create a consistent variable of who walks into the gym every day. But when you've got kids that decide that 3 a.m. is an acceptable wake up time and stress and you're not sleeping as well and you missed a meal because you were busy and on a phone call or whatever, um, then you got to work with what's there and available to you and what energy you've got. And I think the longer you lift and the more you train, the more you actually trust what you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's why I don't use Whoop. It's not why I don't use Garmin. And I don't use any of these things to tell me how tired I am. I use how I feel and what I see in the videos when I'm filming myself lifting and how fast do they look. And there's learning to trust yourself and learning how you feel, I think is a really powerful tool, especially in the day, like you say, of distraction and everyone wanting to sell you a way to tell you how tired you are.
Oh,
I
John. Yes, sir. I fully agree, man. We find ourselves in agreement. I don't use the Whoop either for those exact same reasons, 100%. And I've got a 3.5-year-old in the other room that's home sick from school, coughing, and I'm sure that I'm getting sick as well, and that's real life, and it's going to affect my training, and it is what it is. Uh, you know, we talked about the deadlift and how to get there, which Thank you for that, which is a fascinating tale, working up to 400. Your back squat worked up to, you said it was 380 kilos lifetime best, which is 836 pounds for people at home there. And you went through the strongest man journey, had yourself a knee injury. And for me, poking around your social media, this is something which I found interesting, and maybe you could talk us through this. You said at that point in time in your life, you were tipping the scales at about 400 pounds. And then you had a friend that just made a passing comment to you that said, "Oh, you've got fat man laces." And what, for anyone listening, what does that mean? What are fat man laces?
So fat man laces are something that anyone that's overweight will relate to. Um, People that have never experienced being that level of overweight would probably have never even thought it was a thing. The same as your underwear elastic folding over.
Mm,
So they're everyday things that you don't actually appreciate that you're doing to compensate for how overweight you are, and things that impact you day to day. So essentially, a fat man lace is where your stomach is so big that you can't actually sit down, bend forward, and tie your laces. You have to put your knee to the side to create space for your stomach to fit in between your legs, and then you tie your lace. And then because of the angle, your lace ends up being off to one side.
mm.
Um, so I know, my friend noticed it, pointed it out to me, and I was like, yeah, that's not good, is it? I have to physically mold my leg position to be able to tie my own shoelaces. And that's one of the comments that actually then sparked the right. It's time to get my life together and now move on from strongman. Now that I don't have to be this big. And again, I think it falls into that identity piece from earlier. Like I identified as a rugby player, then I identified as a strongman, and we put that whole like psyche of we are our sport, and where
Mm-hmm.
does the sport separate from the person? And you convince yourself that I'm this big, I have to be this heavy because I do this sport, and this is what's demanded of me. Um, and then when you're not doing that sport anymore, you then just make excuses for yourself. Oh well, I used to be a strong man, and I always joke like John Clark, formerly known as Strong, because it's you could easily hold on to that. And for me, I've developed this mantra over the years of don't be the guy that used to, be the guy that
Mm.
does, that's doing it now. And that doesn't mean we have to achieve the things we were doing in our 20s when we had more time and there wasn't as much mileage on the and wear and tear on the limbs, but it's don't allow the former past successes or who you were back then dictate who you are now if that's not who you are anymore. So I went on the weight loss journey. I mean, the part around the getting stronger was putting on the body weight because ultimately to do that you're not seeing many guys with abs pulling 400 kilos plus. I
Right,
don't think any.
right.
And yeah, you have to ultimately be. There's some sacrifices that you make to do that, and that is your health. But I think every sport has an element of unhealthy practice at the very top end, at the sharp end of the
Yes,
sphere.
I think so
It's
too.
not if you look at a lot of the top CrossFit guys, it's probably not healthy how they train and how they live, and that's why they don't do it forever and ever. And once they stop
Mm-hmm.
doing CrossFit, they don't look like they used to when they competed anymore because it's an unsustainable way of living as a healthy person, whether you've got abs or whether you're 400 pounds. And so the weight loss journey started for me from there, really. And then it was a case of just chipping away at it. And it was the same mantra that I took to the strength increase as it was with the fat loss. Um, where are my markers? What are my milestones? And to get to the next weight loss target is to focus on the next pound. So lose the next pound, then the next pound, then the next pound, and then just keep chipping away to get to where you want to get to. And then that took me down to the lows of sub 100 kilograms.
And did you lose about 60 kilos?
At my heaviest, I was 182. And then at my
Okay,
lightest, when I was full endurance marathon runner, I was 96, I think.
okay.
Um,
Could
so yeah,
you,
fair chunk of weight.
I mean, that's a tremendous amount of weight to lose and a tremendous amount of weight to keep off. And, I talk to a lot of people who, more people fail than succeed in trying to do that amount of weight loss, but obviously you found something that actually worked. So for people watching or listening, could you lay it out for them? And maybe it wouldn't work for somebody else, but what did you find worked for you, and how did you actually stick with it and not have this back and forth yo-yo effect?
Honesty, honesty with yourself. Um, the common the common golden thread of people that are able to lose weight or achieve any kind of output, really, whether it's getting stronger, whether it's going faster, whether it's whatever, is honesty with your commitment to the process. And I think that that's one of the key things that I see a lot of the time. Oh, I'm only eating 2,000 calories. Okay, if I followed you around from the minute you woke up to the minute you went to sleep, would I also agree with that statement? Probably not.
Mm,
Thermodynamics, right? And that's not to say, that's not to oversimplify a complicated situation. Like I used to have what I would look back now and call, if looking back now, I call it disordered eating. I would struggle with, I'd eat until I was feeling sick, and I'd binge, and food was a reward system. And I came from a household of childhood poverty where we lived in a council house and we had no money and we had no food. And I almost then did the opposite as a young adult, where because I didn't have it as a child, it then became something that was a reward system as I got older. And it took a long time for me to understand that you can have it, but you just have to be honest with yourself that you've had it. And then what comes next? And I always use the bank balance analogy with everyone when it comes to fat loss or weight loss, or however you want to describe it. But if you if you know that you've got a big bill coming up, you've got two options. You either don't save and then you put it on a credit card,
mm,
or you save and then you spend the savings. But either way, whether you paid the bill the following day, you don't declare bankruptcy. You don't just go, "Oh, I'll just start again tomorrow." That's not how the bank works. You owe that
mm-hmm.
money. So you have to either pay the credit card off, or we then continue to replenish our savings from there. So it's very much a similar format with food, is that you don't have to be perfect, you just have to be honest about what you're doing. And then when you do make the mistake, or you eat the thing that wasn't within your plan or takes you outside of your calorie ranges, is then what you do the next day that counts. So it doesn't then, one day of bad eating doesn't become 2 days, it doesn't become 3 days and then another month.
Right.
It's like, right, okay, I've not eaten optimally. So how can I now adjust today, tomorrow, and the next day to compensate for not eating optimally? It's like we've got a Christmas party on Saturday night, so I'll eat a couple hundred calories less over the next few days, and I'll save 1,000 calories, and then I can just go out and enjoy my Saturday night because I've banked the calories, so to speak.
Mm,
Um, and it comes down to just that honesty with yourself. And so many people like sip on their lattes and, oh, there's no calories in this. Well,
sure,
there are.
sure.
But you can lie to yourself, you can lie to my fitness pal, but you can't lie to your own stomach. And ultimately, that was one of the lessons that I learned really early on, is that you can make all the excuses for yourself. And there's a huge amount of social dynamic, economic reasons, and so on and so forth, why we eat how we eat. But to lose to make that significant body composition change, it does require honesty and accountability to your goals and to your behaviors. And it's also accepting that you're not perfect and you never will get it right all the time. But one bad day, it's like Rome wasn't built in a day. It didn't fall apart in a day either. It's a slow erosion of your standards. And your standards, as much as they can slowly erode, take time to slowly build. So build your standards, build your honesty with yourself, build your own integrity that you can actually say, I am actually doing what I'm meant to. And again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier around training and intensity with training. Are you actually training at the right intensity? With nutrition, are you actually really being honest with yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you're able to be honest with yourself, then that's what then gives you the freedom to then actually start seeing the changes that you want.
Yes, I would. The on. I mean, I fully agree with you, and I feel like we could go down a whole bunch more rabbit holes with all the different things that you've done. But in linking back to the parts of our previous conversations of real life having no regard for your schedule, um, I've got to get my little girl to a doctor's appointment, so I'm going to have to actually sadly wrap this up because I'd love to chat with you about a couple more other things, but maybe we can have you on again in the future to discuss the whole other side of your endurance career and all that as well. But I love your honesty. I love your training perspective. I love your focus on, simple things aren't easy. and doing them well drives the needle forward, making sure that you get recovery, that life's going to throw curveballs at you, and that's okay. You're going to find a way to get up the next day and try to make a better decision. For anybody watching or listening, could you let people know, you know, how can they find you? How can they contact you if they want to learn more about you? If they want to get involved with some of the programming or coaching that you offer, feel free to let us know.
Yeah, no, so the best place is probably just Instagram, which is the bending barbell. I probably should change that username really because there's not many barbells getting bent nowadays. But yeah, so the bending barbell on Instagram is probably the best place. Then you've got all the usual things like my email list and whatnot on there. The whole point of that Instagram account really is just to try and give my perspective and my insight into training as an aging athlete. So yeah, if you want to come see what my philosophies are as I'm now getting older and now staring down the barrel of retirement from competitive sport and so on and so forth, then yeah, come along for the ride. And if you've got any questions or anything you want to ask me, again, like reach out. Like the whole point of me always saying yes to any podcast is that I enjoy opening the doors to help other people. So if there's anything about my journey that you want to ask, then just ask. I'm an open book and happy to answer everything honestly and yeah. So yeah, reach out and drop me a message if there's anything you want to cover.
Very cool. Once again, John, I really appreciate it, brother. And yeah, we may have to circle back and have you on again.
Yeah, no problem. Just let me know. But yeah, thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.